My father suggested a matchmaking meeting, and I went with a casual attitude. But when I saw her, who had courageously come to meet me, I felt ashamed of myself. I realized I wasn't ready to express my true feelings to her just as I was then. I'm Michael Williams, 28 years old. Living alone with my father. My mother passed away a few years ago, so it's just the two of us, which can be a bit gloomy. My work was in the construction industry. I worked as an employee at the company where my father was the president. It was during my job search that I decided to take over my father's company in the future. Until then, neither my late mother nor my father ever told me to take over. They let me do whatever I wanted. When I seriously thought about working, I wanted to be as reliable as my father, so I decided to follow in his footsteps. It's not an easy path, he said sternly, crossing his arms, but I remembered he seemed a bit pleased. I started with no knowledge of anything at all. I crammed in skills and knowledge desperately. My supervisor, who acted as my trainer, scolded and yelled at me almost every day, but now he recognizes me as a good partner. My father usually doesn't praise me to my face, but when he's drunk, he called me his pride and joy. I was working hard in my job, aspiring to be like my father, whom I respect. Anyway, Michael, do you have a significant other that you would consider marrying? One day at night, my father asked me after coming back from a business social. Well, no, not at the moment, I replied. I was not very good at talking to women and shy about romance. Because I had been so focused on work, as I got older, it was even harder for me to step into a relationship. He must have been worried about me. Thinking so, I responded casually, then can I talk to you for a second, he prompted. Today, I had a drink with Mr. Thompson of Thompson Construction, a subcontractor, he said. Then my father showed me a photo on his phone. This is Mr. Thompson's daughter. Why don't you meet her for a matchmaking date? A sudden proposal for a matchmaking date. I was surprised that such a proposal would come to someone like me. But I wasn't very enthusiastic about matchmaking. Moreover, I almost burst out laughing, thinking that she was out of my league. She had beautiful long hair and distinct facial features. Her gentle demeanor made her seem like a popular beauty. Such a beautiful woman doesn't need to go on a matchmaking date, does she? I thought my father would laugh and agree, that's true. But my father looked sad and started talking about her, by saying, actually, you know. It turned out that Mr. Thompson's daughter had a hearing disability, and because of that, she herself had given up on marriage. While marriage wasn't everything, Mr. Thompson had muttered today that he wanted her to have a family and be happy. How about just meeting her, he suggested. Honestly, I wasn't keen on matchmaking. But I was attracted to her just from her looks, and she was exactly my type. I added a condition that if we could avoid the formalities of a traditional matchmaking date, well, if we just meet. I replied somewhat indifferently to my father, but inside, I was looking forward to seeing her. On the day of the meeting, Mr. Thompson also said that everyone would be nervous if they were too formal, so we decided to meet in casual attire. Still wanting to look a bit nice, I wore one of my favorite jackets. The place was a fancy restaurant that my father and Mr. Thompson frequent. We had reserved a private room. Arriving a bit early, I waited for Mr. Thompson and his daughter. As I heard the staff's voices from beyond the door, Mr. Thompson and his daughter entered with nervous expressions. We exchanged greetings, but I was captivated by her beauty, which was even more striking than in her photos. She was petite and had sheer skin. Her elegant demeanor was instantly noticeable, and it made my heart skip a beat. Nice to meet you, this is Sophia, my daughter. Mr. Thompson introduced her, and as she looked at his expression, she turned towards me and said in a soft, slightly hoarse voice, Nice to meet you. I'm Sophia. I introduced myself to them too and we started with some light small talk. That was the only time I heard Sophia's voice during the meeting. She smiled gently while occasionally looking down and then up again. I, too, was mostly nodding along to the conversation between our fathers. Whenever our eyes met, I would return her smile, but I started to worry if she was getting bored. She looked around at everyone's faces and then down, maintaining a smile so as not to disturb the mood. I was worried she might be pushing herself too hard and was thinking about how to communicate with her when it happened. Michael, I assume you've heard about Sophia's hearing impairment, right? Mr. Thompson's voice, which had been lively, suddenly took on an anxious tone. I am aware, but Not in detail. As I said this, Sophia's expression clouded over, and she looked down. It seemed she realized the conversation had turned to her, judging by Mr. Thompson's expression and demeanor. She seemed to be biting her lip. I was concerned about her demeanor, but I listened attentively to Mr. Thompson. Sophia used to hear normally. During middle school, she began not to notice when friends called her, indicating changes in her hearing. By high school, she was using hearing aids, but her hearing continued to deteriorate. Now an adult, she cannot hear at all in both ears. She could speak if she wanted to, but she had become afraid to use her voice and hardly ever spoke up. Even after Mr. Thompson finished explaining, she looked down and kept her lips tightly closed. Worried, I asked, "Sophia, are you okay?" She looked up suddenly with a startled expression. "We can communicate without any problems using that, right?" I smiled and pointed at that. Though I couldn't see Sophia's lap, she probably had something there. She gently placed her phone on the table. On the screen, the words I had just spoken were displayed. Using an app on her phone that converts voice into text, she was listening to every conversation. The reason she occasionally looked down earlier was to check the screen. When Mr. Thompson was talking about her past, I noticed her biting her lip and tensing her shoulders when he was talking about something painful for her, even though she was not supposed to hear the content. I had wondered how she knew what was being said, but I caught a glimpse of the phone she was holding in both hands when I shifted my posture. "You caught me." Sophia typed on her screen and showed it to me. I laughed in response, and she returned the biggest smile of the day. Seeing her bright expression, Mr. Thompson also smiled warmly. "Shall we eat?" My father called out, and we began the meal. It proceeded like a regular dinner, without any stiff questioning. The fathers ended with, "Let's have dinner again sometime," and Sophia and I exchanged a casual, "See you," with a wave as we concluded the day. Back home, my father immediately asked, "How was it?" When I inquired if he meant whether to pursue the matchmaking, he nodded, "Yes." Of course, there is the issue of hearing impairment, and you might not have been able to have a great conversation with her, but you will get to know each other better from now on, and she seems honest and pretty. He reflected positively on the day. But I was overwhelmed by various thoughts, all pressing down on my hesitant. After pondering for a while, I told my father, "I think I'll pass." My father must have expected me to agree. His smiling face quickly turned to anger. "Don't you feel ashamed of yourself? Are you prejudiced?" "That's disgraceful," he exclaimed. He pressed on, accusing me of appearing uninterested from the start, and not trying to engage with Sophia during the meal, thinking it was because of her hearing impairment. "I didn't think you would care about that. If your mom saw you now, she would be sad," he sighed, disheartened. I wished he wouldn't jump to conclusions. "No, Dad, you've got it all wrong. Didn't you see?" The reason I declined it wasn't what he thought. My late mother used to work at a school for special education. As a child, I often accompanied her to school events. And since my elementary and middle school was close to a special education school, we had many interactions and joint learning opportunities. I grew up understanding the importance of respecting each other. Though we moved away after middle school, I had friends from that time whom I fondly remembered. So I had no prejudices about Sophia's hearing impairment. The reason I declined it wasn't for reasons like that. You saw the look on Sophia's face today. She was trying her best to smile, but it looked like she was having a hard time. I think she must have had a lot of courage to come. I feel ashamed of myself for accepting the matchmaking with such a light heart. I should have thought about it more carefully. "I don't think either of us are ready for marriage," I explained. My father looked disappointed and muttered, "You don't have to decline." But I insisted, "Please let me decline this once. I need more time to think it through," and I looked him straight in the eyes. Then, my father quietly nodded and said, "I understand." The next day, I conveyed my decision to Mr. Thompson. He seemed saddened but accepted my feelings. A few days later, on a Friday, which was a compensatory day off for me, I went to Thompson Construction. I was there to meet Sophia, who worked as an office clerk. I had informed Mr. Thompson beforehand. When I discussed with Mr. Thompson that I wanted to give something to Sophia, He suggested that it would be easier for us to meet at the company rather than meeting privately. She didn't know I was coming today. I thought it might make her uncomfortable if I told her in advance, so I decided to surprise her. Mr. Thompson greeted me, saying, "Hi Michael, glad you to come." Then he said, "I'll go get Sophia, so wait here." And then he tapped me on the shoulder, just a little bit harder. It was like he was giving me a shout out. Sophia appeared from the back of the office, surprised. To her surprise, "Thank you for the other day. And this is for you." I told her briefly, so she could read it with the movement of my mouth, and handed her the letter I had written. She seemed perplexed by the suddenness, but Mr. Thompson facilitated a moment for us to talk. We went to a small park near the office and sat on a bench. "Please read this now." I gestured towards the letter. Sophia carefully raised the letter and ticket I had enclosed with it to her face, making a gesture as if to say, "I'll read it." She gently opened the envelope, her eyes widening at the ticket inside. Looking at me with blinking eyes, she held the letter in her left hand and the ticket in her right. Raising her left hand to her face, she signaled, "I'll read the letter first," and quietly read through it. In the letter, I apologized for declining the matchmaking, worried that I might have forced her into a situation she wasn't comfortable with. I expressed my happiness at having shared a meal and included the ticket as a token of my appreciation. After reading, she folded the letter, mouthing "thank you." Then she took out her phone, typed something, and showed it to me. "Thank you for the letter. First, I want to say thank you. Having a hearing impairment, I'm not good at interacting with people. I was anxious about what I would be asked the other day. But you didn't ask about my hearing at all, which was a first for me. You spoke in a way that I could respond with nods or shakes of my head, which made me feel relieved. Thank you." Sophia typed this and showed it to me, and after I read it, she mouthed, "Thank you again," smiling brightly this time as she held up the ticket. Then started typing again. I was curious about this art exhibition, but I was too anxious to visit it alone. "By the way, how did you find the standby screen on my phone? I was pleasantly surprised to know that you also like the paintings," she wrote. During the meal, when she had placed her phone on the table, I had noticed her standby screen was a picture of architectural art that I also admired. There was an art exhibition at museum in the next town, and I had given her a pair of tickets as a gift. But in the letter, I wrote, "I love this picture, too. I feel relaxed in a place where I can look at pictures and paintings. But well, I'm not sure if I should go there alone." I guess I was a bit of a schemer when I wrote that part. Sophia pointed to that part of the letter, chuckling and shaking her shoulders with laughter. Then she typed something into her phone hesitantly and showed me the screen. "Is this an invitation for a museum date?" Reading those words, I felt my face heat up. But it was okay since she laughed while shaking her shoulders. It seemed like Sophia's tension had eased a bit, and I felt relieved. I pulled another ticket from my pocket, and Sophia made a face as if to say, "It's the same one I have," and looked a bit shy. "It's just a place to look around, and if you don't mind, would you like to go together?" My voice was converted into text to her phone. Seeing that, she looked up happily, smiled, and nodded. The following Sunday, Sophia and I went to the art exhibition. We quietly looked at paintings and photos, signaling each other with our eyes when we found something wonderful or liked something. Just smiling with our mouths or nodding. After slowly walking through the museum, we bought coffee from a coffee shop and sat in the outdoor seating area. Today, I had something serious I wanted to share with her if I got the chance. "May I talk about something serious?" Seeing my earnest expression, Sophia also looked serious, alternating glances between my face and her phone screen. I took a deep breath and began to speak slowly. I declined the matchmaking, but in reality, I was seriously thinking about the future. "Sophia, you have a charm that draws people in. I especially like your smile. I want to see more of it. I was happy when we discovered a shared interest, and I enjoyed being with you today. I want to talk more with you. But I'm worried it might lead you to distress if we get closer." In school, I became friends with a kid with special needs. But he left saying we were different. He didn't want to be a burden. I just wanted to talk more and be closer to him. I'm not comparing that boy to you, Sophia, but I don't want to hurt you by my desire to get closer. Still, I want to talk more with you, Sophia. After saying this, our eyes met. My hands were a little shaky, but I raised them to my chest level, mustered my courage, and tried to convey my feelings. Sign language, just a little. But would you mind? I showed her some sign language. Actually, I was afraid to show this sign language. The friend with special needs once said I was mocking them because I was able-bodied. I had learned a little sign language in middle school as a way of communication. But that had hurt someone before. Though now we have convenient phone apps that convert voice to text or allow for quick typing, sign language still allows for face-to-face communication and easier expression of feelings. I realized its value when I saw Mr. Thompson and Sophia using sign language effortlessly during their conversation at the end of that meal. I was unsure what she would think, but I felt sign language was the best way to convey my feelings. I haven't done it in years, so I've forgotten a lot, but I want to learn sign language again because I want to talk more with you. My thoughts appeared on the phone screen. Sophia stared intently at it. After a while, she looked up. Her eyes brimming with tears, but she showed a smiling face. "Thank you," she replied in sign language. Indeed, Sophia's smile was the best. Seeing her happy and enjoyable expressions made me want to strive to communicate better with her. From that day, Sophia and I started exchanging emails, going out for meals, and gradually getting closer. We shared our fears and experiences from the past. Sophia explained how her worsening hearing had led to misunderstandings or others thinking she was ignoring them. She said that people were leaving her because of her hearing impairment, which was sometimes a hassle for those who could hear properly. Even though she knew the cause was her inability to hear, it was hard for her to receive and convey words. And she became more and more afraid to interact with others. The matchmaking had been under reluctant agreement to Mr. Thompson's insistence, thinking if she just had to sit there, it would be okay. But then we got to talking about hearing impairments and the fear got the better of her. She thought she would be interrogated in detail, looked at with pity, or faced with displeasure. She was afraid that she would see it and get herself hurt again. So she was surprised by my reaction. After hearing about my mother's profession and the school initiatives, she understood. But seeing my natural interaction despite her hearing loss made her feel more positive. Additionally, both of us felt a calming warmth like a gentle breeze when we were together, whether it was our second meeting or after several dates. We both found ourselves laughing naturally. On a sunny, breezy Sunday, I remembered our first date, thinking, the weather was just like this back then. "Hey, Mommy. Why did you and Daddy get married?" Behind me, my 5-year-old daughter, playing with her mom, suddenly asked a question she must have learned from somewhere. "What?" I turned around, and my wife was showing her the phone screen. "Your daddy fell in love with your mommy when they first met," she read it aloud. My daughter, who could read simple sentences, grinned as she looked at both my wife and me. "Wait. Your mommy fell in love with your daddy, right?" I said. My daughter started laughing first. Then, after checking the words on the phone screen, my wife also laughed, holding her stomach. Furthermore, my daughter and wife peeked at the phone screen and looked at each other and laughed. "Mommy says Daddy is her Prince Charming. She says you made her a princess. Daddy, you're so cool." When my daughter and wife caught my eye, I felt bashful. Seeing them both laughing, I embraced them tightly. I could feel the warmth of my wife and daughter on my cheeks. My daughter laughed heartily, and my wife looked at us with a gentle gaze. They were irreplaceable to me. It was a moment that made me want to continue being a cool dad so that I could protect them in the future.